Welcome back to Tide Pod on the YouTube home of Tide Illustrated. Jack Knowlton and Tony Tsoukalis recapping Alabama's 94-85 loss. The first number one, number two edition of any game in the SEC or between two SEC teams did not go the Tide's way. One of the more high-profile eye bobs in the rivalry's history. Ends up with the visitors, Tony. Auburn defeating Alabama 94-85 in a frustrating loss for the Crimson Tide. It was objectively, I think, a very good game. You had a lot of runs, some comebacks. Auburn gets up big. Alabama continuously cuts into the lead, but could never find, that push to put themselves over the top. And ultimately, the best team in the country showed itself. Nate Oates said that after the game. I thought his words were good there. We were not the number one team in the country. They showed they were. Obviously, there's a lot still in Alabama's hands. They've got 6 more games in the regular season. Can certainly still contend for that conference title, but are now working from behind once again, and an opportunity missed on their home floor. And missed, I think, is a fitting word choice because there was a lot of missing going on the Alabama side, shooting the basketball, Tony. And that's where I think we can start, kind of breaking down this game, and then, we kind of look ahead and discuss some larger things of what this performance says about Alabama. But after a really good offensive performance against Texas, the Tide picked a bad day to have its shooting hands disappear. Alabama in this game shot just 38% from the field, 19.2% from three, 5 of 26. They did go 26 of 35 from the free throw line. That's actually above their season average by about 3%. But in that first half, it did not look like they were going to get there. Missed a ton of free throws in this game as well. 14 of 30 on layups. That, to me, I think is the worst one. This team has not been a phenomenal three-point shooting team. They certainly needed more than 19% to fall against a team like Auburn. But I think you couple that with these at-rim misses. You can go back, and we transcribed the press conference, and Nate Oates, we got it on video over on the YouTube as well. You can go back. I think Nate Oates went through the list of every guy's layup, whatever they were on layup attempts, and it was pretty ugly. Tony, what did you make of just a grim shooting performance? How much of it was, to you, just some offensive sputtering from Bama, and how much credit does maybe Auburn get defensively for what they were doing? But I'll say it again, 14 of 30 on layups. That's where I turn to first as a big losing point for the Tide in this game.
Well, while we're just pouring on the bad stats, let's get a couple other ones out of the way. This is the first time in the Nate Oates era history that Alabama has not led a game at any point at home. That was, we'll get more on that. Just that Alabama got close a lot of times to taking a lead, never really could. And then, I think rivaling your stat about the layups, 8 assists as a team is also a pretty damning stat as well. I think that the ball movement was pretty terrible. I think that those two kind of go hand in hand, right? I mean, if you're just going to settle for aimless trips to the lane and get against Johni Broome, that's probably not a good game plan, and it's going to lead to some bad layups if you don't really move the ball around. But I thought the 8 assists, the season low for Alabama, that was also a pretty bad number. Really, when you think about it, all those go hand in hand, I guess, because you don't spread the ball around, you don't get open shots, you take bad shots that get blocked at the rim. So I mean, like, it's it was just a bad offensive night, I would say, for Alabama. There were some things I guess you could you could pull from that. It's kind of funny. You mentioned that the free throws weren't as bad as they seemed. That's something that's haunted Alabama all season. The turnovers really weren't bad, and that's the thing that I think if you would have told Nate Oates that his team only had 7 turnovers against Auburn, I think he would have said, "Oh, they're gonna win." But maybe turnover. We were joking after the game. Maybe turnovers are Alabama's secret sauce to getting things to work on the offense. I mean, obviously not, but it was a head scratcher. I think the uneducated take of this is to say, like, well, Alabama shot 5 of 26, and you're never going to win when you shoot 19%. Maybe not. You're not going to win too much against
probably not against Auburn.
Right, but here's the thing: they tied the game twice in the second half.
Yeah,
7 minutes left, they were tied. So, or 7:30, so whatever, they were tied.
Right.
So and they were shooting bad then. So, like, yes, you actually can if you can move the ball around, if you could get some of those better layups. There were ways to win this game even when the shots weren't falling. So, but yeah, it's not going to help. I think it's not going to happen too often. I don't think Alabama's going to shoot 19% a lot. The point I made in my column is, there is going to be, if you're trying to win 6 games in March and April, you are going to have a bad shooting night. Maybe not 19%, but you're going to have a bad shooting night. Mark Sears is going to have a bad shooting night. I think what Alabama needs to get better at is doing, getting better when Mark's not very good or can't shoot the ball. I think they sometimes get a little bit reliant on him. I think part of the shooting problem was, a lot of those players, kind of crumbled, kind of lost their confidence. And then it went to Mark, who was just not shooting the ball well, and he had to do everything. And I think some of it is Mark probably saw that, probably thinks that he has to do everything, and it's just a culmination of all of that put together. So, there's a lot to fix. I think this is a game where, Alabama made some mistakes. We were saying, Alabama made some mistakes that they didn't get punished for. That's been the theme of this whole podcast this year. They got punished for their mistakes in this game, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, we do need to, I think, evolve from the live by the 3, die by the 3 thing. It is much deeper with this Alabama team. It has been in wins this year. They are not a great 3-point scoring team this year, and they have been not a great 3-point scoring team in a couple of other Oats seasons. I believe the one where they went to the Sweet 16 in 2021, they weren't that great shooting from 3 then. So, this isn't overly uncommon, but I think you're right. And Mark Sears does become kind of a microcosm of this. When it's not efficient, whether or not, a lot are going in, and especially when it's not efficient from scoring inside. I mean, this is the number 2 team in the country coming in Alabama in 2-point scoring, because they overemphasize getting looks at the rim, and they overemphasize, getting to the foul line and, having those opportunities. And they didn't get those. And I think in large part, when you talk about this team shooting itself in the foot with turnovers in some games, I think that was the way they kind of shot themselves in the foot, was missing some of those open opportunities. I mean, the one Nate Oates pointed to is the Jaron Stevenson, where he tried to roll. He did great work to get on an offensive rebound and then rolled the kind of finger roll layup off the rim instead of just yamming it. That was strange. I will say, and that's where I want to talk about Mark Sears too, because there's some bigger conversations to be had about him, but I will get this out of the way first. Auburn came into this game not being a phenomenal team in terms of generating turnovers. They deserve a tremendous amount of credit for affecting a lot of Alabama's shooting. Alabama had to play slow in this game. They did get a 1.3 in points per possession in the second half, but that first half, they were just absolutely stifled. They could not get out and run. They were not getting those kind of, that kind of first shot attempt within 10 seconds of the shot clock. And I think a lot of that credit does go to Auburn. There is some ball movement stuff that has to work, that Alabama has to work on. You're right. The 8 assists is far too few. But when you start talking about Mark Sears, there's definitely some bigger conversations maybe to be had about him, but you got to give Denver Jones a lot of credit, Auburn's guard. I mean, Bruce Pearl said it after the game, said he, was kind of like, he called out the Auburn media. It was kind of funny. He said they should be talking about him more as a legitimate defensive player of the year candidate. And he did look like one against Mark Sears. So I will say some of this is Auburn just being a phenomenal team in terms of disrupting what you're trying to do, even if that isn't forcing a lot of turnovers.
Yeah, Pearl said that Denver Jones should be on the Naismith all defensive team. So he took it even a step further. Look, before we I want to get this out of the way. Like, this is, we're going to say a lot about Mark Sears. Alabama could have certainly had somebody else step up as well. I think it's just a matter of Mark Sears is so important. One thing before I get into this, I just kind of thought of this. Before the season, or maybe before SEC play started, I think I had a conversation with you. If it wasn't, it was with somebody else, where I said, if Alabama lost Mark Sears or Auburn lost Johni Broome, who would be in the worst, position? I think actually it'd be Alabama. I think there's certain times where, yeah, sure, Alabama probably has more talent throughout its roster. I think it's got probably more depth, but I don't know if they have a guy that's willing to take over a game outside of Sears. And I think that, when we're talking about Sears doing this stuff, it's not because he's failing so extraordinarily. It's like right now, sometimes he seems like the only person that can do some of this, this stuff. I mean, he seems like the only person that can take over a game. So when I say that, though, he needs to get better at, distributing the ball. I think there's too many times where, he'll just kind of, it's almost like, with not to make this a football conversation, but it's almost like with, Jalen Milroe, it's like you trust that ability to just tuck it and drive, and so you need to kind of scan your options and make better decisions. It's not always go to the lane and hope for contact. I mean, and that's, Sears is great at getting past people and he's great at drawing that contact. So, I mean, and I think he got to the line, 11 times? He was 8 of 11. So, he did draw some of those fouls, but he's become too reliant on that. And they're going to need him to be a better facilitator of the ball. And they're probably going to also need somebody else to be a better facilitator of the ball. Let's also point out that Mark Sears is third in the SEC in assists per game. He leads Alabama in assists per game. So it's not like a guy that can't distribute the ball. He's just he's not always making the best decisions. And I think the point I made in my column is, look, this is going to be a brutal 6-game stretch. Actually, every game Alabama plays for the remainder of the season, because you all have the 6 games in the SEC tournament. Maybe you get an easy game in the SEC tournament somewhere, but then you got the NCAA tournament. Like, pretty much every game is going to be hard from now on, and they're going to need Mark to do a lot of things, and he's not going to be perfect through those next, I don't know, however many, 10, 12 games that they're going to play. They're going to have to find ways to make it work when he's not shooting. And a lot of it, if he is going to be this driving force to another Final Four, he's going to have to find ways to adjust his game. Nate Oates after the game said that this might have been a game where Mark Sears should have had 10 assists instead of 18 points, and I think that's true. I think if he would have gotten more people involved, you look at some of the other games that he's had. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I had it written down, but North Carolina was a game I think he shot kind of poorly. The offense did well. Kentucky was a game where he didn't shoot well from 3. The offense did well because he had, I think, 9 assists against in Kentucky. Who do you have 11 assists against them? I'm drawing a blank here.
It was Oklahoma, the first SEC.
Yeah, Oklahoma, the first game. Yeah, and he shot
1 of 6 from 3.
1 of 6. Yeah, he's 1 of 6 from beyond the arc there. So I mean, he has proven that he can do it. I think you're going to need to see him when he has those games where it's just not falling from 3. I think be the facilitator, get your assist up, and work that part of your game.
Yeah, he's got 8 assists in the last 2 games. He had 6 against Georgia in that blowout win and 9 against Mississippi State in the game before. So those numbers have come down. And yeah, I don't know, and I've gotten to go look at kind of one highlights package from Auburn, and there was some stuff I really liked in terms of, first off, I actually thought his energy coming out was really great. I thought he got a couple of open threes that he just missed. He had a couple layups that he missed, but then after that initial Auburn run, he had the 2 and 1s in a row where he got the ball, he attacked downhill right away, and you saw that, got to his left hand and scored. And then there are just some of these other plays where, it's him getting the ball, and whether he draws a mismatch or not, it's kind of everyone just sort of spacing for him and just kind of hoping that he can make something happen with his left hand. And yeah, that can work when you run some kind of actions around that and are setting, whether it's off ball screens. He had a couple plays with LeBaron and Philon that I thought looked really great. And to me, that's kind of a promising thing. You saw that kind of working when Philon was starting at the beginning of the year. Hopefully those two can kind of develop a good guard tandem. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily giving him less touches, but yeah, I think it's Sears being more willing to hunt assists. And then to me, it also goes into what, Oates said, where, continuing to up his effort defensively. And yeah, in the playmaking department, when his shot isn't falling, he talked about just with the team in general, not being like a front runner and not, upping your play just because the game is going well. You need to, be that guy when it's not. So yeah, it's sort of a conundrum because you're right. He is still kind of the guy that, when you've needed him to go get a bucket in clutch games. I think back to like Mississippi State where he had the assist to Nelson and then he had the bucket. Those were their last 2 field goals of that game and they won that. So I think he's still performing in the clutch. There is something strange about his game in terms of not kind of hunting the playmaking stuff. And I think he's just continued to struggle to adjust to all the extra attention he's received in this year since being an All-American. We're continue to kind of have these conversations from the beginning of the year. Teams are giving him extra attention, and he in some games, just kind of has an inefficient night, but doesn't make up for it in other areas.
Yeah, an interesting stat I put in my column. In Alabama's 4 losses, Sears is averaging 13.75 points per game, shooting 26% from the floor and around 16% from 3. In the 21 wins, he's averaging 20.3 points per game, shooting 42.6 from the floor and 39% from 3. So yeah, I mean, you look at those numbers, and if I'm another team, I am going to do my best to take him out of the game off, like from a scoring standpoint. That seems like the secret sauce, right? If you can get him to struggle to shoot, double him, put your big time defenders on him. That's how you stop Alabama. I mean, that's what the numbers are telling you. So you're going to need to find ways to get it to other players when teams are inevitably going to do that from moving forward.
Yeah, and I'm not, we're not Nate Oates. It's hard to like scheme what that looks like. I mean, I know you've been talking about, do you play Sears off ball? That's starting to become a lot more of a conversation. I just like, to me, I look at Alabama's offense and it still seems so fluid and it's so fast. And I don't think that's going to necessarily solve all your problems, but there needs to be far less of this. Give him the ball and stand around and let him try to go.
I said this, we've talked about this. I don't actually like him and Youngblood on the court together. I don't love it. I think Youngblood probably plays good enough defense, and I think it's a defensive thing. But I really like Sears and Holloway on the court together. I think on times when if you're playing in Auburn, right, and they're slowing things down, and you have to do a lot more half court, you can almost interchange Sears and Holloway as point guards. I think Holloway is easily the next best ball handler, or probably I honestly think he's a better ball handler than Mark. I'm not saying that they should make that switch to point guard. I think there's a lot more elements to that, but I think he's very calm with the ball. He didn't have a great game against Auburn, but I like Holloway in those situations, and I think you can almost use him to kind of interchange Mark at that point guard position, especially if teams force you in the half court. Obviously, Holloway can shoot lights out. And then you could still have Youngblood as that spark off the bench. I know you don't want to lose Holloway as that spark off the bench, but I think you could have that with Youngblood. I think you could maybe, if you wanted to have more defense and you didn't want to use Holloway in that role, I do think LeBaron Philon, he was sneaky good in this game, Jack. He wasn't.
I thought Philon was great.
Yeah, the numbers weren't great. I mean, they weren't bad, but they weren't like
numbers weren't great for anybody.
Yeah, they weren't eye popping, but I guess you could make the argument that maybe LeBaron's back to his early season form a little bit more, and maybe you just start working him with Mark, and they can kind of you want somebody that can handle the ball and maybe set up stuff for Mark, where in times where you just don't want to always put the offense through Mark. It'd be nice to maybe use Mark, even if he's your primary point, as an off-ball guard at times. Maybe set some stuff up for him, especially when he's struggling in that role. I think Holloway can do it, and I think LeBaron can do it. And so you got to figure out ways to get those people on the court with Mark, because I think there are going to be times where teams are going to slow Alabama down, and they're going to have to find different ways to do it.
It goes back to, and this is where we can kind of shift the conversation into what you wrote about after the game with Alabama going into that stat of them not losing or not ever leading and not being able to fully recapture the lead. It goes into when you talk about finding lineups, what Nate Oates said about his second half group again. I mean, I don't know how much we're going to continue to beat this dead horse too, where they just come out of halves and frankly end halves in just miserable fashion. And it's a difference, right? When you look at Alabama and you're evaluating them versus the Auburns, the Floridas, the Dukes of the world. Duke and Florida both also got punched in the mouth in the opening couple minutes against Auburn, and had a response, and then were able to, kind of build on it. What we saw from Alabama and what we saw from the likes of Mark Sears and the rest of those starters, they get punched in the mouth, they build their way back up, and then they surrender a run coming out of or going into halftime. Then you know what you need to do coming out of it. Instead, the 9-point lead gets extended to 14, and Nate Oates is standing at the podium saying, I probably should have put a different lineup out there. So I think you're right. Something needs to be changed up, regardless if it is a starting five thing. And to me, I just think, I don't know, it feels like at this point it just doesn't seem to happen. But I think for sure out of halftime, I definitely wouldn't mind you trying something like that, where it's, maybe it is a Phylon Holloway, Sears, Muhammad Diabate, Cliff lineup, and you just go small or whatever. But something's got to, I think, switch there.
I was going to say that, Jack. And the reason why I was going to say that, and you might call me crazy for this, but like, look at the plus minuses. And I know that's not the best way to run things, but your two worst plus minuses are Grant Nelson minus 20 and Jaron Stevenson minus 12. What if you just ran like you said, a small ball lineup where, you're going to give up some length there, but maybe that's what the answer was against Auburn, and maybe that would have opened things up a little bit more. And like everything you do against an Auburn is going to come with a consequence. Like obviously you're small there, and you're going up against a pretty hefty front court, and that opens up challenges on the other end. But if you just look at the plus minus, and maybe even just throwing something that Auburn would have to adjust to, I think that would have probably like surprised Auburn a little bit, right? If you come out with this small ball thing and look to take it over, and you kind of needed something different. It wasn't just the second half; it was the end of the first half where they tied things up finally after climbing out of that hole, and then go into the half on a Auburn 7-0 run. That really killed the momentum, and it almost seemed like that just. Yeah, you would expect at home to kind of be able to just come out and like wash that and kind of come back out strong, but it seemed like that lingered. That end of the first half was so bad and so just soul sucking that I think it kind of like haunted Alabama early in the second half as well. So I think maybe just something extreme like Cliff, Mo, and three guards, that might have been. That might have been pretty good.
Well, and the concerning thing to me then is, you look back at that LSU game, with Mark not playing the second half, Cliff starting the second half on the bench. Nate Oates did that to kind of send a message and light a fire under those guys. And what he said after Auburn was that he thought about doing that, but in a game like this, he would rather go with, the guys that are going to put him in the best chance or in the best position to win the game. But that's where my concern is, where I'm like, I don't know why that was your thinking, or maybe it wasn't. It's just the players didn't live up. But I mean, this has been just a frequent theme now where it is not what you're looking for when you come out of a second half. So yeah, I think something's got to give eventually. I'm not sure what that will ultimately look like. Obviously this team is deep. They have options to, that I think people would be interested to see, and that can certainly play. I mean, Holloway and Mo certainly deserve a lot of credit for how they've played off the bench. Phylon seems like he's finally starting to return that corner. I think it's interesting, but we'll see how Oates kind of responds when he watches the film and talks about it, moving forward.
I don't actually think this is, I was okay with this, but just since we're talking about lineup moves, it's kind of worth noting that Aiden Sherrill didn't play in this game. At all, minutes. I kind of don't know how he would have matched up, and I think he might have been kind of cooked by the likes of Johni Broome. He might have been a situation where a young forward or a young kind of center almost is going to struggle in a situation like that, and maybe Oates didn't feel like he had to do that. So I kind of get it, but if we're talking about, I mean, Aiden's kind of played well. It wasn't great necessarily against Texas, but 7 points in 8 minutes against Arkansas and 12 points in 20 minutes, 12.7 rebounds in 20 minutes against Georgia. So I mean, like he he had been playing well, and it was kind of, I guess, I wouldn't say it's surprising or anything like alarming or anything like that, but it was noteworthy, I guess, maybe that he didn't even see the court against Auburn.
Yeah, it's it's a freshman big in the SEC against the best big in the country. Not only Broome, but I mean Dylan Cardwell's a decent player too for Auburn.
Sure.
Their other kind of center. Yeah, I don't know what Sherelle would have given you. I mean, certainly anything probably would have been better in that first 4 minutes, and we can talk about Johni Broome. Scored or assisted on the first 9 points in that 9-0 run when Auburn started the game. Finished with, I think, 18 and 12. 19 and 14 and 2 blocks. He had 24 points and 25 points in the 2 games last season, so he did score a little bit less this time. Yeah, I don't know if
He was
Sherelle.
so good. Like he made so many shots when they needed him to. Like Johni Broome came as advertised.
Yeah, I mean, he's an excellent player. I actually will give, that first 4 minutes, Clifford Amore's one-on-one defending on him was really concerning. And then he came back and I thought actually made a few plays, had 8 points, 12 rebounds. Mohamed Diabate continues to be Mohamed Diabate. I thought he defended Broome one-on-one really, really well. Broome's got a few inches on him and they trusted Diabate. And I thought he came through fairly well for the most part, had 8, 7, and 2 blocks. Grant Nelson, 12 points and 12 rebounds. He had to guard Johni on a couple of appearances, but for the most part was just kind of getting rebounds.
Grant's numbers to me were puzzling because I don't think Grant played super well. And then you look and he had a double, right? Yeah, he had 12 and 12. I just didn't feel like he played that well. But I don't know what you think. I mean, also he was the highest. He was minus 20 when he was on the court. But I like when I look back at that, I was like, damn, I don't. I was surprised to see that he did as well as he did.
I think Auburn affected him well as a driver. I think Grant, you would like to see another game like he was able to have against Kentucky. It doesn't even need to come with the 3-point shooting, but he was able to kind of take over that game. And now Kentucky, a vastly inferior defense to Auburn. But, that's another thing with Grant is he is not a floor spacer in the same sense that say Zvonimir Ivisic is for Arkansas, where he can step out and hit a bunch of threes. Because Grant doesn't shoot the 3 ball all that well. He can make a couple. He certainly can get hot. Illinois and Kentucky are great examples of that. But, I would like to see him more, maybe him getting the chance to kind of create one-on-one and go at people. And that was kind of the whole thing that gets advertised with Grant is he can take a big outside the 3-point line, get the ball and isolate and go score on him. But we didn't see that a whole ton, but I still think Grant has been solid, was, all right in this game. But, Broome, yeah, Johni Broome is Johni Broome. The most impressive thing for me with him is again, 6 assists in this game, I think is what I'm just blown away by. I mean, it is whether you defend him one-on-one or not. There were so many times where Cliff was guarding him and then Auburn would just run some action. One of their great shooters just gets 2 steps past the Alabama defender and Broome just finds him so easily. 5 of his assists came on 3-pointers for Auburn. So they're able to get it inside outside with him. It is just, I wouldn't be super concerned about Alabama's interior defense from this game. I think Johni Broome is just a really good player. And if you really want to scrutinize Alabama, then I would like you to have the thought experiment of let's have this Auburn team go against Alabama with Nick Pringle instead of Clifford Amore and freshman Mohamed Diabate instead of sophomore Mohamed Diabate.
Hey, how about Cliff Amore shooting the 3? I thought
he did attempt a 3, his first 3 of the season, which again,
Coleman would have broke if he would.
Yes. And again, the reason he's shooting that 3, I think, is again a credit to Auburn. You could chuck Johni Broome on him, and because he's not a threat, he sinks in the paint. Alabama had to pass him the ball in that possession. There, he was the only outlet, and Auburn knew it. And if the shot clock was running down, they had to find some sort of shot, and that was the best look. So that shot, if anything, is a testament, I think, to Auburn's kind of defense. And then, the last thing I have, and then I think we can kind of talk about just a larger thing before we look ahead for a second. But we hinted at it at the beginning. Alabama, they went 3 of 12 on shot attempts when it was down by 3 or less. Auburn in the same span, 8 of 18, 5 of 9 from 3 when the game was within 3 points. Obviously, they had the
The
lead
5
at
of
that
9 for
time.
3 was so crushing for Alabama. I mean, like, every single time Alabama got close, Auburn hit a 3, you
Yep.
know? I think one of those 3-point misses came while the game was tied, and then, like, or no, came while yeah, I'm not sure, but I think, like, one of those 3-point misses came, like, when the game was tied, and then Alabama missed, and then Auburn hit. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was, like, more often than not, when the game got close, Auburn found the person and just killed it right back. It's almost like, what's the meme of the guy, like, hunching over with the game with the controller,
In the
like,
video games, they're
yeah,
trying in try hard
when
mode
it gets
now.
into
Yeah.
crunch time, yeah, it's almost like Auburn just goes like, "Oh, okay, they're getting close. Let's swat them back away."
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah, they turned all the momentum away. I mean, two of them were there was the Mark Sears 3 and then the Chris Youngblood 3 on like back-to-back possessions, and Coleman was the loudest it was. And Auburn's two answers were Tahad Pettiford shooting a 3 with Sears in his face and Chad Baker-Mazara shooting one with Chris Youngblood in his face. And you're just like, what do you do there if you're Alabama? You
Yeah.
have a hand in them. They just hit a transition 3. I mean,
Those were like Auburn make, Alabama make, Auburn make
yep,
consecutive possessions, right? Yeah. Yeah.
yep,
That's you can't, I mean, that's from a momentum standpoint, that's rough. Especially,
yeah.
if you're Alabama, you're shooting 19% from 3. You answer back and it's like, okay, you finally answered back and finally got one to fall. And then Auburn's like, okay, we'll do it again. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, I when you can just have answers like that, again, it speaks to Auburn's depth, and I mean, it goes back to, Alabama had statistically more bench scoring on average in games than Auburn. Auburn outscored Alabama's bench 42-32 in this game. The others stepped up when they needed to, and Alabama didn't get quite enough lift from some of those guys, and then it goes all the way back to you won the rebounding battle. You didn't turn it over. So you get those small wins. I appreciated Chris Youngblood saying that after the game. He's like, we got to look at whatever silver linings we can look at sometimes. And it was good. We cut the turnovers down, but you miss all those layups. It just doesn't cut it. And then, they're able to answer the occasional big threes you're able to hit. And it's just over against a team like that. You have to have other teams have to play almost perfect games to beat Alabama this year. But Alabama had to be a little bit closer to perfect than it probably usually is to beat Auburn. I don't know if
Fair.
that's maybe a way to dumb it all the
No,
way
no, no.
down,
I think
but
that's fair. Yeah. I
but
think
you look at
I was gonna say you look at silver linings.
Mhm.
I think before we like move on, that's a good little bit of segue to, if you are looking for like reasons of optimism, we've provided a lot of doom and gloom. The turnovers, that is a silver lining. I thought, like we both said, LeBaron, silver lining. I thought he played well. I think he's continuing to come back to his early season form. And then, I mean, look, it wasn't that much of a factor, but you did get 4 minutes out of Darian Reed. It's good to see him back on the court. He looked like he was moving well, got to the line 4 times, made all 4 shots. I think you're going to get to see more from him, and that might also be something nice, that's going to help you in the future as well. Obviously, he wasn't a factor against Auburn, but it is nice to see him return to the court. When Nate Oates originally kind of talked about his injury, it seemed like maybe it was going to be a long time.
Felt
So
very damning, yeah.
yeah, it is good. It's small silver lining, but it's good to see him get back out.
Yeah, and I think, that is where you kind of scratch your head. And again, it goes back to the notion, when you look ahead now, this Alabama team has more losses at home than it does in true road games. It has just the one to Purdue. Lost at home to Ole Miss, now at Auburn. Obviously, the Oregon loss was at a neutral site game. So, you have more more home losses than true road losses, excuse me. But, you were able to take some incremental steps in terms of showing that against an elite team, when you focus on those areas, turnovers, rebounds, things Nate Oates has been calling for, you like Alabama showed they can do it against literally the best team in the country. So now, you'd think, does that build potentially them to be able to do that the rest of the way against all these other teams if they have that much of a focus? However, when that goes well, you have the shooting go awry and the missed layups go awry and the ball movement still wasn't quite there, albeit against a very good defense. And so you look at that when you look ahead to that game in Neville Arena, and obviously Alabama's going to learn a lot about itself in the 5 games between that. I mean, is this an Alabama team capable of beating Auburn on the road. I think you talked about it in the preview pod. Could this crazily, because Auburn's a good road team too, could this just be a case where the two road teams win the Iron Bowl of basketball? Is there some fundamental flaws about Alabama that doesn't let them beat a team like Auburn, or is it just that it has to kind of all come together? And if you can find that perfect 40 minutes that Nate's been calling for all year, you can beat them.
Yeah, I look, Auburn played really, really well. And they're probably going to play really well in the jungle, but at the same time, like if you look at how much better Alabama can be in this game and how much better Auburn can be, I guess that would give you some optimism. Now, expecting Alabama to be that much better while playing in one of the hardest places to play in college basketball might be a little bit optimistic. But I guess I think that there is a way to beat Auburn. I mean, look, they were close at times on Saturday, and is Johni Broome going to be that much better than 19 points, 14 rebounds, and 6 assists and 2 blocks? That's pretty damn good.
Maybe. Maybe.
He honestly could. I'm trying to think of
30, 20, and 5. I don't know.
I mean, Pettiford can hit better than, the 1 of 5 from 3 that he shot. They can do a lot better on free throws. I think that's an area that, Auburn could improve on. But, I think Auburn was pretty good. So if Auburn does this again and Alabama comes out better, it could theoretically be a closer game. I think really, too, what Alabama needs to worry about is that game even mattering? Because they've got a lot of tough games heading into that one. And I think, at Missouri becomes a must win if you're going to have a shot at the SEC title. And then actually, you know what, Jack? I think you need to win the next 3 games, which is going to be tough. But I think you need to win the next 3 games. You got at Missouri, you've got Kentucky and Mississippi State in Coleman. And then I think you probably need to split one of Tennessee and Florida at Tennessee and then home against Florida. If you split one of those and you win the next 3, I think you go into Neville having a shot to beat. I would imagine maybe Auburn's going to lose at some point. And so you have a shot of getting a share, or maybe Auburn loses twice and maybe even have a shot of passing Auburn.
Yeah, it is less of a lack of confidence in Alabama, because I really do think like it is so kind of frustrating, and I understand people's frustration where all of this hasn't come together at once against an elite team, I guess, especially at home so far this year, and it hasn't produced a win yet for Alabama, and there are some kind of glaring things that you look at, but they are just still so talented, and it is so hard for teams not named Auburn to beat them. I think in addition to Alabama kind of shooting itself in the foot, like other teams have to have really big performances against them. But it's less of a thought of that. But when I think to that Auburn game, it's more of just my thoughts on Auburn. I think Auburn for me is in that tier of like the 2 UConn type of teams. I think they're that level good. I just think it's, you sort of have to catch them on a bad day and be darn near perfect. And I don't know. I know Duke and Florida managed it, but Duke, Florida, Alabama, and Auburn are the 4 number 1 seeds in the NCAA tournament right now. So it's not like they were beaten by slouches. But, maybe if Johni Broome's ankle injury flares up, you saw them almost lose to South Carolina when he was out. So,
Yeah, but then they never lost when he was out, right? So, I mean, you can say that, but then they didn't actually lose.
They didn't.
What do you think Alabama needs to do to maintain a number 1 seed? Because I don't feel confident in like Alabama winning the SEC regular season title right now. It just doesn't seem like that's probably going to happen. I mean, it could. They're not out of it, but what do you think they need to do to maintain the 1? How many of these next 6 do they need to win?
I think you're for sure right. The next 3 are all must wins. I think that has to happen. Especially considering, if you want to further that anti-home narrative, if they lose one of those to Kentucky and Mississippi State after beating both of them on the road, and you put that in stone. But I think I would say in the next 6 games, I mean, to hold on to a 1 seed, the nice thing about with how good the SEC is I think the teams kind of on that 2 line right now, I think are really in that tier below for me of the Duke, Bama, Auburn, Florida coalition. And you have a chance to play Florida. You have a chance to play Tennessee, who's on that 2 line. I think that game is probably a must win as well. But I think if you are going to drop that second one in Neville and Auburn just kind of separates itself as that true number 1 overall seed, I think 4 is probably a safe number
I think 4.
in the
Yeah.
next 6, and then I think you can afford the loss to Auburn, and then whether it's splitting, maybe you split the Florida Tennessee games. Maybe you do drop one to Mississippi State or Kentucky, as frustrating as I think that would be for people. Then I think regardless, you're getting that top 4 seed in the SEC tournament. You probably get a win in the SEC tournament at least, go to the semifinals. Even if you lose there, I think you're still, obviously other teams and other conferences can do things to shake things up. But with where stuff stands, I think it's probably 4. You at least get to the semis of the conference tournament. Your resume there, if you're Alabama, is probably enough to
I think
it.
I think it's 4. I think you could have like a weird scenario where it's 3 if you if
the 3 of the last 3.
well, no, I think it's the opposite. I think maybe if you lost,
yeah, sorry, if the 3 of the
lost
last
on the road
wins
against Missouri, let's just this is like the 3 route, and then assuming that you handle business in the SEC tournament enough to maintain wherever you're at the end of the regular season. But if let's say you lose 2 games in a row, you lose at Missouri, you split one of the Kentucky and Mississippi State, or actually you win both the Kentucky Mississippi State, and then you win. Sorry, yeah, okay. Your 3 route is you lose to Missouri, you beat either Kentucky or Mississippi State, probably Kentucky, and then you win 2 out of 3 against Tennessee, Florida, and Auburn. I mean, I think maybe at that point, because at that point you'll have beaten your last 3 games. You'll have beaten 2 top 5 teams. Heading into this, you probably do maybe hang on to a number 1 seed at that point. But yeah, it's I think that's the thing that Alabama should be kind of focusing on too. Is just maybe just holding on to that number 1 seed.
The recent NCAA tournament, top 16 that got released on Saturday, the committee met and did it, has Alabama as the number 2 overall seed. Losing to the number 1 overall seed should not change that. And I think in the scenario you're talking about, I wouldn't expect, unless it's maybe a Houston going on just a supernova run. And on top of that, they would have to pass a Florida and a Duke for me, because I think if Duke, with how good the SEC is, I think a team like Duke or a team like Houston or a team like Purdue in the Big Ten, even winning those leagues outright, just because those leagues are so obviously inferior to the SEC, I think that you still have to jump a couple of teams and kind of catch Alabama. So I don't think it's like a win the league scenario outright or a conference tournament to hold on to that number 1 seed, even if you are dealing with some of those really good conference champions, some of those other conferences. I think it's just the reality. The SEC is just that good.
Does Alabama lose again in Coleman this year?
Yes. I didn't want to. I mean, I had said no, and then they've already lost to Auburn, so now I think I'm allowed to, re-go back on I'm already wrong. Yeah, I think they're going to lose to Florida. I think Florida's a really good team. I think Florida pushed them really hard last year in all 3 of those games. I am more worried about that game for them than I am Tennessee on the road.
Are you thinking 3-3 then?
No, because I think then I would be 4-2, right?
I'm
Florida,
assuming you have them.
Florida
I'm
and
assuming
Auburn?
you having them lose to Auburn and Neville.
Yep, and then Florida.
What?
And then Florida at home.
And you just have them winning their next 4 games?
Yeah, so it'd be beating Missouri, beating
I mean,
Mississippi
that's
State.
going to be tough. I mean, that would certainly be it'd be a bad way to win in the regular season, but that'd certainly be an answer in terms of responding from this. If you beat 4 straight ranked teams, including going at Tennessee, who a lot of people aren't they rated as a number 1 seed as well? I mean, that would be quite the answer.
2 currently, but yeah.
I don't know I don't know if that's what I was wondering. It's like if they don't win at Coleman, if they lose again at Coleman, I think it's going to be pretty hard to win 4 games. I just don't know if you're going to win at Tennessee.
Yeah, momentum wise, for sure. I'm looking at it, I guess, more from a matchup and teams that I
Right.
like
Yeah.
against Alabama. And so when I just look at it from that perspective, those are the two games I would knock them. However, you're right. I mean, momentum is a really real thing. If you beat Missouri, beat Mississippi State, beat Kentucky, beat Tennessee, you're probably pretty confident that you should beat Florida at home. And then, the game in Neville is the game in Neville. So yes, that is, I will, I guess, caveat that's a fair point. With
Yeah,
that.
I actually think that they could lose one of the two between Kentucky and Mississippi State.
They definitely could. They
Those teams are
definitely
super
could.
hard to sweep,
Yeah.
and
Which
both
one?
those,
If you're picking which one, because I have a feeling on which one I'd take
maybe State.
as a win.
Honestly,
I
maybe
think State.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
State.
Because I could see them building up. I could see them coming out really strong against Missouri, and then they're going to be up for Kentucky, and that look, it's almost like you got to have to win like one big game at home this season, right? Like, surely, I guess you can count Oklahoma, but not really.
You got
So,
three chances at it, so
I think Kentucky's that game, and so you win that one. I could see you slipping up against Mississippi State, and then that puts your backs to the wall, maybe between Tennessee, Florida, and Auburn.
I'm gonna say this scary thought: if they lose those 3 home games, your best
All three
win
of
at
them?
home. If you lose all 3 of them,
Well,
you're
sure.
looking at an Alabama team. No, I'm just saying this is just a fun thing. I'm not saying this is gonna happen. I'm saying this because
Doesn't
your
seem
best
very
home.
fun for Alabama right now.
It's not. It's not. Sorry. Fun was the wrong word. Just kind of a maybe funny in a twisted, deranged way. If you lose all 3 of those games at home, your best win is December 14th against Creighton. Probably that's probably your best home win.
A
If you're
home win.
Alabama.
Yeah, home win, sure, yeah. But I mean,
Yeah.
you still have plenty of wins. Yeah.
I think that's wild. I think that's wild that it's like that. Creighton's I think a 6 seed right now in the
They're
NCAA
also not
tournament.
going to lose. They're not going to lose their final. They're not going to lose 5 games at home. So I mean, that's kind of a
If that did happen, it's just wild that especially in this SEC, that's the most
sure. I
marquee
mean, yeah.
win.
Wild if they lost. I mean, technically, Jack, they could lose all 6 of these games. And
Hey, you asked for hypotheticals. I'm purely giving some
I know. That's the scary thing about the schedule. They literally could lose all 6 of these games. They won't. They won't win all 6 of them. I don't think either. But yeah, it's a rough schedule for sure.
I'm worried for them against Florida and Auburn. I'm a noted Tennessee hater. I think they're overrated.
I know,
so
but
I'm not worried about them there. But
that's still a tough place to play.
oh, it's very tough. But it'll be a tough game. I won't. I will definitely not go that far. But yeah, I think Missouri will be interesting. We can end kind of the show with a quick look there. I think State could absolutely punch them in the mouth. Kentucky to me doesn't have enough of a defense. They're also woefully injured right now. I don't know who they're going to have back by that point. But I think they can win a track meet with Kentucky. Tennessee is scary. Florida, I think at home is scary, and Auburn is Auburn. So it's a gauntlet. Yeah. It's a gauntlet. There are numbers next to all of those teams. Any final scheduling thoughts? Or I can give you a quick. Obviously, Missouri's up next. If we want to touch quick on that game before we end things.
Yeah, I mean we can talk a little bit about Missouri.
So Missouri up next. Obviously, every game is ranked now for Alabama, assuming Mississippi State stays ranked until they play them, which I think they definitely will. So Missouri, 8 p.m. SEC Network on Wednesday. I have a couple stats for you that might weigh what your thoughts on this game are. So I'll give those to you, and then we can see how we're feeling. On the road, Alabama has obviously responded tremendously well going back out on the road after losses. They beat Texas A&M after losing to Ole Miss earlier in the year. They, of course, beat North Carolina on the road after losing to Oregon, and then beat Illinois in Birmingham. I guess, so technically not a true road game, but beat Illinois in Birmingham after losing to Purdue. So this will be their 4th game coming off of a loss this season, fourth game away from home coming off a loss this season. Missouri, they're 14th in KenPom. They just beat Georgia, 19-6, 8-4 in the conference. My stats for you. This team is 5th in the country in steal percentage, and they are 1st in the country in bench scoring. 3 guys, I'll give you names. Tamar Bates, he's their leading scorer. He was on the team last year, about 13 points per game. They got a guy from Duke named Mark Mitchell, averaging about 12 and 5. And then their reason they are 1st in scoring is because they have the very likely SEC 6th man of the year, His name's Caleb Grill. He's really old, and he's hits 1,000,000 threes. Averages like
He's
12 points a
shooting
game off the bench.
46.7% from threes. That is an
Yes,
insane, like that is a stupid number.
and he comes
Um,
off the bench for them.
yeah, that is an
Um,
absolute stupid number.
do you want my take on this game? Because you mentioned Alabama starting fast, and
Yes,
I'm
but
glad you said that.
let's go Missouri grad Jack Knowlton's take on this
Yes.
game.
So, yeah, full disclosure. I went to Missouri. I've watched this team a lot this year. And it's funny you mentioned Alabama starting fast because I think they're going to need to, or at the very least, they're going to need to weather any punches like better than they did against Auburn. Missouri starts games incredibly fast. They get out to leads. Usually, then what happens is teams are able to work their way back into games. But they score incredibly fast. And I think Alabama's bench is going to need to be a lot better. Missouri gets a lot of depth scoring. They run a really, really deep rotation, kind of similar to what Auburn did last year, where everyone kind of said Bruce Pearl can't keep running whatever it is, 9 or 10 guys, 11 guys into the NCAA tournament. Missouri does that. They have kind of also proven they can play in different ways. I don't think they'll win a track meet. To me, I think this game either goes kind of if it goes bad for Missouri and good for Alabama, I think it ends up kind of like the Vanderbilt game because Missouri forces a lot of turnovers just like Vanderbilt does. And then if it's going to be a tight game, I think it looks a little bit more like the Kentucky game where it's really high scoring, maybe sort of all over the place, a lot of turnovers on both ends, and just points off of that. So that's kind of where I see some in between of that for Alabama. I have no reason to doubt them going on the road, especially coming after off of a loss, like I just said. But if you let this Auburn loss get to you, you're going to lose this game too. Missouri's a good team. But yeah, that's my outlook for that one. What are you thinking?
I mean, other than Caleb Grill hitting more than 7 threes in this game, yeah, that's a certainty. Caleb Grill having like 25 points on 7 threes is like definitely going to happen. That Alabama's proven that they can still win when they do that. But that like I feel like whenever there's somebody that you have to like circle, like that Alabama just doesn't do that. So I could totally see him coming in and just cooking. Um uh it's I think a lot of the stuff you pointed on was pretty right. I think they're gonna have to respond. I think that this is this Alabama team that I think it could get shook a little bit. And if after losing to Auburn, if they do start off and get punched in the face against Missouri, I'm just interested. I'm not saying they won't respond. It's just kind of interested to see how they will respond. And so, yeah, I'm interested in that. So that's something to monitor. But I do expect them to take care of business. I don't have a score prediction or anything lined up, but I expect them to take care of business against Missouri.
Yeah, again, I mean this Alabama team, it clearly has a road villain identity that it loves, and you know what? If there's an identity you want in March, that's it, because all the games are on the road. So, if you like playing away from home, I think they like seeing that gym empty out early. But yeah, I mean, this is a Missouri team that has surged. They didn't win a game in conference last year, so anything they're getting is kind of a cherry on top of an unexpected season. The other guy I will point out too is Mark Mitchell. I think back to what Malik Dia was able to do as like the 6'9" forward against Alabama with Ole Miss. Mark Mitchell can cause some kind of matchup things. He plays a little bit bigger than he is. I think Jaron Stevenson's going to be really big in this game with guarding Mitchell and Tamar Bates, two kind of like wings who can just score. Mark Mitchell's a little bit more post heavy. So, Cliff will have to do his work against him, but Missouri definitely doesn't have a Johni Broome. They do not have like a 7-foot center who can score 20 points a game. So you don't have to worry about that if you're the Alabama front court. So a little bit of a, of an ease there.
I love me some Malik Dia.
Malik Dia is an excellent. I feel bad I feel bad comparing anyone to what Malik Dia was able to do.
For those listening that don't know, Malik Dia is a Tide illustrated hero. I mean,
yes,
we're big Malik Dia respecters.
He's so far the only one who's gotten a superlative. I think and the only non-Alabama player to get a superlative in my triple-double column. I think I'm going to give one to Denver Jones, so he'll probably be joined in that mantle. But Malik Dia is great.
Did Broome not get one?
No, I liked what Denver Jones. Johni Broome's too obvious. I like to get a little nuance.
No, I mean if you gave me Nate Oates' job tomorrow. I'm spending all my money, all my NIL money on Malik Dia, and I know he doesn't make sense necessarily for this Alabama team, but I love him, and I'd take him.
He's only a junior. He's got some eligibility left. Ole Miss is a really good team. Ole Miss is lost to Alabama and Auburn by I think a combined like 20 points. Like they've pushed.
Yeah.
They put both. Or sorry, lost to them by a combined 10 points because they beat Alabama. Oh, I didn't actually see the Egg Bowl of basketball result.
They did. They lost by 10. This is not an Ole Miss podcast. We're gonna move on from this, but yeah,
it's not.
They lost.
Yeah, Missouri.
There's absolutely no reason for Alabama to talk about Ole Miss right now.
Missouri, it will be tough. I mean, all these games are going to be tough. You know, the Alabama road team that we've seen has to show up. You know, if it wants to avoid letting this Auburn thing snowball, because this is a thing where if you do lose this game, I think people start really freaking like, oh my God, did Auburn break them? And is this going to go really bad? I mean, Nate Oates talked about the Tennessee loss on game day last year and how he didn't get them ready to play against Florida and they got absolutely boat raced on the road. So certainly a lesson to learn from.
Maybe Alabama needs to just slump into the SEC tournament, lose the first weekend, and then get like a 4 seed, and then it'd just be the same thing as last year or 3 seed.
Yeah,
whatever.
Just repeat it over and over. Or maybe some loyal Alabama donor needs to give his Achilles to Latrell Wrightsell and fix that situation. I don't know. But that I digress. We've gone 56 minutes, deep dive pod recapping Auburn. You know, I think it's worthwhile for you fine listeners and those maybe trying to cope from the loss. Is a tough one for Alabama. But you know, you have a big chance to bounce back against some damn good teams. Alabama is still a damn good team. Let's finish with that. And we'll see how the Tide rolls on from here. Tony Sakalas, Jack Knowlton. Subscribe on the YouTube if you're watching. Give us a follow on Spotify if you're listening to the pod. Subscribe over on Tide Illustrated. Had a ton from the game. We'll have a ton going forward for hoops as well, and some spring football stuff coming up because we're getting closer and closer to that as we get closer to March. So tune in, subscribe there, and we will see you next time.